And we continue with open lines. Again, I want to thank Indira Singh. She's quite a courageous lady, and she's not, she ranks up there, I think, in a lot of ways with some other heroes in our country who persevere at trying to tie these threads together, bring it to the attention of the American people. And, folks, we've got to do something. You know, I know a lot of you people do not believe the government's official, findings, the conclusion on 9/11. And, I appeal to you, in a nonpartisan way. Because I know a lot of you are fond of Bill Clinton. You're a lot of, you've got Democrats and Republicans. I mean, hey, I know that a lot of you are fond of both sides. But, at the end of the day, when you get down to all of this stuff, and it's undeniable, we know that the Oklahoma City bombing was a terrorist attack. President Clinton connived at and covered it up. We know that George Bush the 41, George H.W. Bush was a bad guy. We know why he perpetrated the Gulf War back in the 90s. It was to bolster and to inject the United Nations into it was to revive it. Because you see, the thing is that the globalization plan is well underway. And I think that the key point, the turning point for this nation was the new millennium. Because I have well-placed sources that I've dealt with over the years. And, as bizarre as it may sound, that millennium celebration that took place in Egypt was more than you realize. Because the whole cast of characters were there. And they're on a timetable, and it's critical that they make sure that it takes place, because if it doesn't, they lose their chance. So, with that, let's go to Loveland and Harold in Loveland. Good afternoon, Harold. You're on the air.
Good afternoon, Michael. Thank you very much. Your show was excellent, and
Thank you.
As usual, very informative. I must say I have to agree with you. We need to have an effective response. I agree with your guest that there now has to be an effective response
Right.
for being tested.
Right.
Most people, I know a lot of good people, but they're uninformed, and I know there are certainly those that get the glazed over look. I've received that I don't know how many times, but a lot of people are getting up to speed. They know something's not right, but there has to be an organized, effective response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to say what that should be, like a march or a whatever, how does one get something like that going? And I know it has to be organized, but where and how and what to do?
Well, see, and that's a good question, because as it comes down to it, and this is where I think a lot of frustration lies in me and a lot of other people. And that is, how do you rally the nation to get busy and do this and do what needs to be done? How do you get them to understand that their freedoms are at stake here? How do you get them to understand that when we lose the sovereignty of our nation, the game is up? I mean, we will be no better, no different than all the other third world countries that this cabal has destroyed.
And I must say, Michael, as well, is I think the biggest problem we've got is the media.
Yes.
Because once they have captured the media, all one has to do is look at our local paper. Mm-hmm. It's just incredible. It's a joke. And all the papers here locally, they're all controlled. You'd have to be an imbecile not to be able to see it. And yet, when that's all you're used to, you're literally being led down the road, being pulled by your nose, and you don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we get around this? I must say I don't know.
Now, one of the other things that I think I've been talking about a lot lately on the program is this, okay? First of all, you have to, and I think this has to be grassroots. Of course it has to be grassroots. What you need to do is, and I've talked about this before, it is so vitally important that everybody understand the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and what those things provide for, the deeper meaning behind them, the deeper meaning behind what liberty truly is, okay? The way you do that is you've got to educate your neighbors, your family, and your friends. You have to, you get these little booklets, and you pass these booklets out to them, you have conversations, you get groups together, and you talk about this stuff. The idea is this, is that when we stop electing these officials, when we stop passing these pieces of legislation like referenda C and D, If we take away the money, we take away the power. The power has been consolidated into the hands of a few people because of our ignorance in understanding what our constitutional republic is. You hear even the president calling it a democracy. It is not a democracy. It is a constitutional republic. And the idea behind a constitutional republic is not to have power centralized into a regional government, but having power at the local level where it belongs. And that is what keeps big government in check, and that is what keeps it from becoming what it has become. And it literally is threatening our very way of life and our existence.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Thanks for your call. Okay, and again, this is vitally important to the whole process, is education. Understanding that whenever a politician comes to you, and we're seeing this playing out in referendum C and D. We have a Republican governor who lined up with the Democrats at the state capitol here, and somebody who even just a year before that was praising Tabor. Now all of a sudden we've got a crisis. We need more money. What do you think that money is going to go for? Why do you think that the illegal immigration issue is so important to our president and to all the other legislators? Because they're getting their marching orders from the globalists. They're saying to them, look, the time has come that an independent nation is an outdated, archaic model. You need to be interdependent. Well, just even myself, and I'm not an educated man, but I can tell you just on the surface of things, I'm crying foul because it just doesn't seem to me that you can make it work. It's not an equitable arrangement. You just can't make it work. And for the life of me, other than, intellectually smart but stupid in knowledge, I can't imagine how educated people who have degrees could even ponder something like this as being successful. And, you add to this mix these other dynamics, okay? Just for example, I've got an article today. It's from the 26th of October. Remote control for human beings being tested. Okay? This is a combination of weird science fiction, and insanity is my opinion about this. The things that these wrecked, twisted minds are coming up with is outrageous. This is in Natsuki, Japan. We wield remote controls to turn things on and off, make them advance, make them halt. Ground-bound pilots use remotes to fly drone airplanes, soldiers to maneuver battlefield robots. But manipulating human beings? Prepare to be remotely controlled. I was. This is the reporter talking. Just imagine being rendered the rough equivalent of a radio-controlled toy car. Nippon Telegraph and Telephone Corporation, Japan's top telephone company, says it is developing the technology to perhaps make video games more realistic, but more sinister applications also come to mind. I can envision it being added to military's arsenals of so-called non-lethal weapons, and I love that word, non-lethal. It's just it's a ruse. It's an inhumane, dehumanizing way of controlling you. When I see a person, for example, and I don't want to get too far off the track here, but when I see a woman, and this was on a video that I saw recently, when I saw a woman in Pennsylvania being tasered by these big burly cops, and they're telling her to quit resisting arrest, and every time they do that, they're pulling the trigger on the taser, and they're delivering, whatever the amount of voltage it is into her body. She's having convulsions, and they're beating her up because she's resisting arrest. Of course she's moving. That's non-lethal technology. We're being treated like cattle. Now, a special headset was placed on my cranium by my host during a recent demonstration at an NTT research center. It sent a very low voltage electric current from the back of my ears through my head, either from left to right or right to left, depending on which way the joystick on a remote control was moved. I found the experience unnerving and exhausting. I sought to step straight ahead, but kept careening from side to side. Those alternating currents literally threw me off. The technology is called galvanic vestibular stimulation, Essentially, electricity messes with the delicate nerves inside the ear that help maintain balance. I felt a mysterious, irresistible urge to start walking to the right whenever the researcher turned the switch to the right. I was convinced mistakenly that this was the only way to maintain my balance. The phenomenon is painless but dramatic. Your feet start to move before you know it. I could even remote control myself by taking the switch into my own hands. Now, there's no proven beyond a doubt explanation yet as to why people start veering when electricity hits their ear, but Nippon Telegraph and Telephone Corporation researchers say they were able to make a person walk along a route in the shape of a giant pretzel using this technique. It's a mesmerizing sensation similar to being drunk or melting into sleep under the influence of anesthesia, but it's more definitive, as though an invisible hand were reaching inside your brain. Now, Nippon says the feature may be used in video games and amusement park rides, although there are no plans so far for a commercial product. Some people really enjoy the experience, researchers said, while acknowledging that others feel uncomfortable. This is nuts, isn't it? Is it not nuts? Let's go to Clyde in Arvada. Good afternoon, Clyde. You're on the air.
Oh, hi, Michael. I think this show you had today was probably the best one you've done. I've been listening to you off and on for probably 4 years, even when you were on the other network.
Thank you, Clyde.
Thank you. Couple things. First, I think it's always been understood, at least I've understood for quite a number of years, that when I realized about 20 years ago that the church that Jesus Christ had founded, at best, has been neutralized, and at worst, I think much of it has bolted to the same side these people are on.
Right.
That's when I began to realize that just having studied Scripture quite a bit and prayed and thought and pondered and things like that and kept doing research and reading books, that's when I realized that there's virtually no chance, to be very honest with your listeners, no chance that this can be stopped at this stage. And you probably would not totally agree with that, which is okay.
Yeah.
And here's the two reasons why. If you go back in history and you find you do any research into any civilizations that you want to, not even just take the post-Christian era. What happens is that with the Protestant Reformation, they basically had a very similar type of corrupt system within the Roman Church at that time. It's very similar. It was a criminal enterprise, essentially, because they were stealing people's lands in Europe and other places and placing them in as church property, converting them into church property. I mean, it was just overt and out in the open, and everybody knew about it. And that's part of really what caused the Protestant Reformation. True, there were theological problems, but it's that the church itself was the government, and they had corrupted and turned into basically a criminal enterprise. Now, what has happened in America is a very similar thing. The government that once was based upon some semblance of law-abidedness, whatever you want to call that, or, a legal, lawful government, has been turned into a criminal enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And so the criminal enterprise, one thing about the criminal enterprise, for most human beings, and I think the reason why we're not seeing much resistance to this, is true that I think most of the church has bolted to the other side.
No, I think they've all been infiltrated.
Yes. And secondly, because in history, if you look, based upon the Protestant Reformation, the only people who will raise any question about this, pretty much, I'd say 90%, are people who have some kind of semblance of loyalty first. In other words, they haven't yet totally, and not that we haven't individually, but at least we haven't totally been in an act of total and complete treason or rebellion to God.
Right.
Those are the only people. Now, most of those people now, I think in this situation in America, are probably totally unaware of what Indira and you and many programs you've had have talked about. However, the criminal enterprise at some point, just like in the days of the church and other Roman empires, it has to come out at some point and show its true colors.
And it will.
Yes.
I think it's
and what's
close.
happening is it's coming out and showing its true colors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what makes the difference between this and the Roman Empire just cut people's head off.
Right.
Or crucified them or whatever. And the church just burned them at the stake. What's different now is that the actual technology is available to control literally every aspect of our life.
Mm-hmm.